So here's my homemade hillbilly lawnmower hoist. Had a block of styrofoam down there in case it was gonna, dent any metal or anything. Didn't end up needing that. Now do this at your own risk. And I didn't get under here and work until I felt safe. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 points of attachment. And they're all, probably any one of these points, well, maybe not the side one, that's just to kind of keep it from rocking around. The 2 side ones that hold the mower, either one of these singles that hold the mower. Got some pretty redundant straps on here. If you got a tree, it took me probably 20 minutes scratching my head to figure out how I was going to do it before I got it done. But yeah, works great. So here's the transaxle on the GX85. Transaxle is super easy to take out if you can lift the mower up. I took it out of there on jack stands in the garage. Putting it back in there is a totally different story on jack stands in the garage. Can't see what the heck you're doing. Get it out here. If you got a tree, get some, if you got to go buy a couple of come-alongs and some tie-down ratchet straps, whatever, go buy them. Or pay a lawnmower shop. That looks like a grease zerk. Did not know those were there. I haven't serviced this too much, so I need to find out where all my grease zerks are at. Anyways, there's just 2 nuts and bolts on each side. About everything on this lawnmower is 1/2 inch, so that's nice. So basically, to take it out or put it back in, you pull the 2 bolts on either side. Of course, take your wheels off. There's a little clip right here, and there's another one right back there, right here. And hopefully you can see those in there. They're pretty obvious. They can only really go in there one way. They're to keep the blade belt from popping off when you take the tension off, when you disengage the mower. So I would definitely put those back on. Oh, I forgot to tighten my shift selector linkage. So I'll tighten that up before I put her down here. Yeah, so basically just 2 nuts on the bottom here. You got to take those clips off. It's just about impossible to get the transaxle back up in there. And there's an idler right down here with a spring on it. And I just used a big pry bar and pushed it that way against the mower deck. I got about a 3-foot pry bar laying over there, 2.5 foot. And that gives you enough slack that you can lift the belt up over the pulley, which is right in here. It's a really cloudy day. I don't know how much you can see, but there's a pulley up in there. There's a linkage here for the clutch. Basically just a pin that comes out, a split cotter pin. I put one of the I don't know what the heck you call it. One of the other styles in there that just pushes on and off that you don't have to open the 2 ends up. But yeah, basically you got the 2 bolts on each side. You got a linkage there. You got a linkage there. You've got these 2 clips. Now the transaxle, the pulley on the transaxle is going to hit the pulley on the engine. So you got to bring it over here to the left. You got to bring it this way, get it up, and then slide it over. You can kind of maybe see the pulleys up in there. It's really a cloudy day. Oh, there's also a safety switch right here. I believe that's going to be the neutral switch. Pardon me. So yeah, I'll tighten that back up. But boy, this was definitely worth taking the time. It took me, 45 minutes or whatever to get this thing up in the air. If I was still laying on the garage floor with a flashlight in my mouth, I'd still be saying bad words and nothing would be accomplished. I can guarantee you, because this thing is so hard to work on the ground. There's plenty of information on belt routing online. Basically, the mower belt does not go around the big pulley. The big pulley on the transaxle goes to the upper bolt, the upper V-grooves on the engine pulley, and then it's got a couple of idlers. It's got one there and the spring-loaded one down there, and that's pretty much it. Routing is actually fairly obvious, and if you look at an online diagram and look at what you got, it's not too hard to figure out. There's one more bolt here on the transaxle, and there's actually another one right up there's the top of it. There's a bracket right here that goes up. Everything's fairly easy to get to once you get the thing up in the air, so get it up in the air. Man, is it worth it. I was saying some bad words yesterday trying to put this together in the workshop. Once you get it raised up like this, it's actually a piece of cake to work on. You can see what you're doing. I've still got my lawnmower up on the Hillbilly hoist, but I did not know on the GX85, well, I've only had this mower for a year. This is the beginning of the second season. The oil drain is right there. It has a valve, which actually you might be able to reach through the hole there, it looks like, in the compartment under the seat. So put a little piece of hose on there. There's your oil drain right there. It'd definitely be worth pulling the right rear wheel off, in my opinion, to drain the oil. I mean, it's a snap ring that holds that on there. You got a floor jack, and boy, you pop that wheel off, and there's your easy oil change. And here's my lawnmower safely back on the ground after using the Hillbilly hoist. Worked like a charm. Well, I've still got to do a couple things to the John Deere here. To the GX85, I've got to hook up the throttle cable, put the muffler back on, put some oil and gas back in it, put the battery back in, and I think that's it. Oh, I think the seat safety switch is disconnected. So here's what happened to mine. I got the death rattle. Figured it sounded like a connecting rod or crankshaft or main bearings. It sounded bad. It sounded like the death throes. So I put it on my trailer, hauled it to the small engine shop that's just a couple miles from my house. Got a young kid there. First thing he did was check the dipstick and said, "Oh, you got metal particles in your oil." Well, no shit, it's last year's oil. I have not changed oil yet. I've only used the mower once this season, so I mean, it was dirty oil that I could see if nobody had ever changed the oil, and there was gunk in there and there was chunks in there, but you know, that's fairly normal. But he listened to it. He was a young guy, maybe 19, 20 years old, and it would have probably been nice to have a more experienced mechanic, because he agreed that he's like, yeah, it's ready to blow. That's the crankshaft or the rod or both or the bearings. Then if that stuff went out, it might have taken your crankcases with it. Replacement crankshaft for this lawnmower is $200, which is pretty crazy. Well, anyway, I pulled the engine off, and oh boy, I wish I hadn't have. It's quite a bit of work to get the engine and transaxle out of one of these, and hours of work. Anyway, what happened was the guy I bought it from replaced right in here there's a butterfly on a shaft for the carburetor. That's the throttle, you know, what controls the airflow. And the guy told me that the person he got it from the thing was running wide open, and it was bouncing off the rev limiter, probably the governor, and thought it was a bad rod. So he put 2 new screws in the butterfly. He did not peen them or Loctite them. Never put a screw in a butterfly without Loctiting it, or it's probably not realistic to peen it. That's what they do at the factory sometimes, but Loctite, that's all you gotta do. Anyway, it sucked a screw into the combustion chamber right here. And this is the old style. This does not have overhead valves, so you can pull this off no problem. Had I known all this, I could have taken this cover off, the carburetor off, this cover off, and there's some screws up here that, yeah, they would have been hard to get to. But even, you know, if it would have taken 15 minutes to get a couple screws out, it's a lot better than a couple of hours of pulling the engine. This engine's a pain in the ass to pull. So this has kind of a weird cylinder head on it. Where the spark plug is actually where the dome is over here. It's kind of a, well, it's kind of not really oval, but it's kind of rectangular. It's kind of odd shaped. Well, over here is where the piston is. There is not even a millimeter of clearance when the piston is top dead center to the top of the combustion chamber, which isn't really the combustion chamber. The combustion chamber is over here where the spark plug is. So that screw had embedded itself in the top of the piston, and I don't know where the head is. I never found the head off the screw. It might be in the muffler. I'll have to shake the muffler out. It put a dent in the top of the piston and a dent in the combustion chamber. Not really a big deal. The cylinder walls look fine. So I had pulled the engine. Well, you know, it's junk. Might as well take it apart and see what blew up. Boy, if you get a death rattle in your mower, the first thing I would do would be to pull the carburetor off. Make a note of your linkage. I didn't do that when I took this apart. I'm not a small engine mechanic. I work on motorcycles, and I've worked on quite a few cars, this and that. I didn't know a whole bunch of springs and crap were going to fall out. They do. There's springs for the governor, springs for the throttle return, springs and springs and springs. There's 3 springs on this one, I think, and levers and linkages and all kinds of crap. But, you know, taking the carburetor off is not a huge job, not compared to pulling the engine. The very first thing I would do if you get a death rattle, pull your carburetor off, look down inside with a flashlight and see if you can see 2 screws in the butterfly. If you only see one, there's your death rattle. Hopefully it didn't damage your cylinder walls or valves. It didn't do anything to the valves. The valve faces and seats look fine. I can't see any kind of damage on this one. And even if it did ding a valve and it burns a little oil, oh well. You know, I can put a little oil in it and run it a few more years. That would be great, rather than, you know, I was going to part this whole lawnmower out, and I was already on Craigslist looking for a replacement. Very simple job. Anyway, it would have taken a couple hours, I suppose, to fix the carburetor screw and take the cylinder head off. And the rattle was actually because the screw was embedded in the piston and it was hitting on each stroke. It was hitting the top of the combustion chamber. Because of that offset chamber, you know, the deeper part being where the spark plug is, it's real shallow over here, almost zero clearance at top dead center between the top of the piston and the bottom of the combustion chamber. So that's where my death rattle was. I probably got to go get a quart of oil. I'll check and see if I have any. I don't think I do, but hopefully I'm going to cut my grass today. It's a little bit overgrown, and boy, I'm tickled pink to not have to go buy a different lawnmower. I thought it was unusual. You know, this lawnmower is in really good shape. It does not have a lot of hours on it. Look at the steel deck. You can tell this thing's really pretty low hours. It's not all beat up, except maybe right there where I hit the fence or something and broke a piece off. But it seemed unusual that the thing died like that, because it happened all at once. You know, generally a rod will start making a little bit of noise and get louder and louder. It might get louder over the course of a few minutes or a few hours or a few weeks or whatever, but this just came on. My boy said, "What'd you do, hit a stick?" It sounded like I hit a stick, you know, just all of a sudden started making the death rattle. And I thought it was unusual. And it was unusual. You know, these old school Briggs, it's not really a great engine. It's not a modern engine, but how many of these things ran for 50 frickin' years without a problem? A bunch of them. It's a frickin' cast iron cylinder, you know, or at least liner. This engine should pretty much outlast the mower. The mower should be worn out and the engine still running, maybe running ratty, but I thought it was unusual. So before you throw your lawnmower away, if you got the death rattle, pop the cylinder head in the carburetor, check it out. I hope that helps somebody. I wish to God I would have done all that. I'll bet I have oh, 20 hours, 15 to 20 hours, something like that, into pulling the engine and the transaxle, and it was a lot of work, and it was absolutely unnecessary. Oh well, you live and you learn. I learned something. I've never really had a Briggs apart. I didn't know it was that tight of clearance. Now I do. And now I know, before you pull the engine off, heck, even if a guy had a scope, I don't know if a scope would have looked at a right angle around the corner, but possibly, if you had the right scope, you might have been able to pull the spark plug out and stick a scope down in there and saw the screw on the top of the cylinder head. It was obviously a screw. It was a little tiny screw about the size of an eyeglass screw, but you could see the threads on it and stuff. Anyway, we're going to go get some oil, and, looks like it's going to rain, but boy, my yard's overgrown, so we'll talk at you soon, hopefully with a running lawnmower without a death rattle. I did not make a before video of the death rattle because honestly I didn't want to run the engine at all with the noise it was making. Maybe has a tiny exhaust leak, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. I just wear earplugs anyway. The muffler's a little bit noisy. The thing I love about this GX85 is it has an actual gearbox transaxle. The SX85 and some of those other ones have that variator transmission. My Weed Eater one had a bicycle chain and plastic sprocket transmission. This actually has a transaxle in the back with gears in it. That's pretty cool. So, my 1999 GX85 in the year 2017. Just got the engine fixed. And hopefully it runs another 18 years. I hope this helps somebody out. Thanks for watching.